The NBA draft has come to an end as the second day comes to an end in this new 2-day format for the NBA draft. And it was an exciting day for the Kings. You know, they made some moves, but they made their moves before and after the second round. They traded out of the second round and just made some moves around the edges that are not going to wow anybody who is just, more of a casual fan. Even if you are a hardcore fan, you might not be wowed by the moves the Kings made. It's just about making moves around the edges and hopefully moves that lead to other moves. And that all started before the draft with the Kings trading Davion Mitchell, Sasha Vezenkov, the 45th pick in this draft, and a 2025 Portland second round pick to Toronto. The Kings got back Jalen McDaniels, but really what they got back is getting under the luxury tax. And so that frees them up to use the entire mid-level exception. And so clearly this was just a salary dump for the Kings, because when you look at it, you're like, the Kings, just if you look at it strictly from the 5 assets that were traded, the Kings get Jalen McDaniels, who is arguably the worst of all 5 assets, and the Kings are giving up the 4 better assets. And so obviously that doesn't feel great. I think, when the move was first reported, it was Davion and Sasha for Jalen McDaniels, and you're like, okay, that seems pretty good. Just a salary dump. We get off that salary. And then it's like, actually, we're sending out the 45th pick. And you're like, that makes a little more sense, right? You have to actually give something up to be able to dump this salary onto Toronto. And then it comes out that a 2025 Portland second round pick is included. And at that point, I was like, really? Like, that's what we needed to do to get off these salaries? It doesn't feel like we needed to include that the second round pick, but obviously we can't know. And I think this, like, maybe it was a bad move, but really I think what we're seeing is it's this new CBA, it's the new rules around salary, and that salary just becomes more and more valuable or less and less valuable if you don't want it. And there's also talk about second round picks being more valuable than ever. But really, why second round picks are more valuable is because you have these second round exceptions, which lets you sign your second round picks without counting against the salary cap until, July 31st, I believe it is. And so really, second round picks are valuable because they allow you to not use a lot of money on those types of players. And so that's why you're also spending those second round picks to then get off salary. So in a sense, you're having Toronto take on these contracts you don't want, and you're supplementing that with a way that they can get around spending salary in this draft and in the next draft with their second round picks. Now, none of these assets, whether it be Davion, Sasha, the picks, Jalen McDaniels, none of them are going to wow you. At the end of the day, even if you don't like this trade, you can't be too mad at it because Davion was never going to play. You drafted Devin Carter, and you have Keon Ellis, and you have De'Aaron Fox, and you have Malik Monk. And so we said, after the Kings drafted Devin Carter, you have to, get rid of some of these guards. And I gave it an incomplete yesterday, and it still isn't incomplete, the draft grade. But this is part of the moves after it. And so you're getting rid of 2 players that probably weren't going to play. I do think Sasha Vezenkov is still an intriguing player, but he's just not going to play behind Trey Lyles. And it didn't work out because of his injuries. It was a miss by the Kings. It was a miss. We can say that. Davion Mitchell, obviously a miss. And so you're getting off the price you pay is these second round picks. But I think, it looks bad. The trade looks bad. There's no doubt when you just look at it. And so it's going to be, who do we get with this cap space that we have generated? If the Kings go out and sign Najee Marshall or someone like that with the cap that they created, then if you were to insert Najee Marshall into this trade, the Kings get Najee Marshall and Jalen McDaniels for Davion, Sasha, and 2 second round picks. That's a really good trade, right? And so you have to think about it as the Kings were trading for that cap space. And if they don't do anything with it, then this is an awful trade. But if they do something with it, like a Najee Marshall or someone like that, then this is a great trade. And so again, it's an incomplete because the offseason just isn't over yet. It's barely just begun. Jalen McDaniels, for those that don't know, he had an awful season last season. I think he shot 16% from three. Just was not a good player at all. He's a 6'9" wing. He has length. Of course, the brother of Jaden McDaniels. And he's shot better previously in his career than 16%. So is there a chance that he somehow provides a positive impact? Maybe the slightest chance, but really, I don't think so. He's 26 years old. I don't think he's going to be anything, but at least you are getting another depth wing just to a body, because that was literally something the Kings were struggling with, is just anybody, any wing, like even if they're going to be the last guy on the bench, like it's better to have Jalen McDaniels than a Davion or a Sasha at this point, even if he's not going to make an impact. And so I want to go over the Kings roster as it stands. So right now, I've kind of divided it up into playable players at each position, playable players at each position, and then your kind of depth guys. So in terms of playable guards, I think they have 5. De'Aaron Fox, Malik Monk, Kevin Huerter, Devin Carter, hopefully, and Keon Ellis. I'm putting Devin Carter there because I have that faith that our first round pick will be good. And he's 22 years old. He should be ready to come in and play right away. Hopefully he is. Playable wings, I just have Keegan Murray, which is obviously a concern. Playable forwards, Harrison Barnes, Trey Lyles. Playable centers, Domantas Sabonis. And then you have Alex Len as an unrestricted free agent. So if he comes back, he's a playable center for sure. So that's kind of where the Kings' playable players stand right now. Possible playable players, you have Colby Jones as a guard, but he has a long way to go to get into this guard rotation, obviously, and we'll see if more moves are made, either him being traded or others being traded to open up a spot for him. And then there are some possible wings where it's like, if you squint, maybe they can crack the rotation. Chris Duarte, Kessler Edwards, who is a restricted free agent, and Jalen McDaniels. Am I being generous on even putting them in the possible category? Possibly, but I'm going to have that hope. And then you have the depth guys, the two-way guys, Mason Jones, and then the 2 guys who the Kings just signed as undrafted free agents, Isaiah Crawford and Isaac Jones. And so let's talk about those guys. Last season, the Kings' two-way players at the start of the season, Keon Ellis, Jalen Slauson, who was their second-round pick, and then Jordan Ford. Keon Ellis obviously got upgraded to a full contract, and then they brought in Mason Jones. And so Mason Jones is on a 2-way contract for this next season. Jordan Ford, I never thought that he would stay on as a 2-way player. We don't need another guard, and he just wasn't good enough to play, and he's just too small to play in the NBA. And then you have Jalen Slauson, who's a restricted free agent, and he's not going to be brought back as a 2-way player, and that's disappointing to me. Sure, I guess they could sign him to a full contract, but I don't see that happening. I'm a little disappointed because Slauson, he showed some good stuff in the G League last season. Super athletic, but could handle the ball and push it in transition. Showed some good playmaking in those moments, and just an extremely athletic player and a fun player to watch. Versatile defender. And so it's disappointing that we're kind of giving up on him, it seems, after 1 year. We'll see if he still plays on the Summer League team and sticks around in Stockton. I hope he does. But, we'll have to see. But on to the guys that the Kings got to fill those last 2-way slots. And these are not guys that I know a lot about or knew anything about coming into the draft. So, obviously, there's a lot of wait and see with these types of guys, but Isaiah Crawford seems to have a lot of hype around him. I saw him as high as 28 on one person's board. He's a 6'6" wing with a 7'1" wingspan. At Louisiana Tech, he averaged 16 points per game on over 40% shooting from 3, 2.1 steals per game, and 1.7 blocks per game. So just an extremely versatile wing on the defensive end. Shot really well from 3, and from everything I read from people, people were just surprised that he went undrafted. And it seemed like a lot of people wanted him for their teams. That's a good sign. Although I did see something about a possible injury concern. So that maybe is why he fell. But he seems like exactly the type of player the Kings need in terms of a versatile wing defensively that can also shoot the three. I mean, that's perfect. And so if it really is just about this injury concern, then that's kind of the swing that the Kings are taking at this point. And I think that is pretty smart. The second guy, Isaac Jones, not as hyped as Isaiah Crawford, but he's a 6'8" power forward slash maybe small ball center, 7'3" wingspan. He doesn't shoot threes, or he didn't at Washington State. He averaged about 15 points per game, 7.5 rebounds per game. And so just an athletic front court player. And so right now, where the Kings stand in terms of two-way players, they have their guard and Mason Jones and the ball handler. They have their wing, and their athletic wing, and then their athletic front court player. And so that's pretty perfect. Obviously, like I said, I don't know a lot about these two players. And we did have Jalen Slauson. So are both of these guys going to be better than Slauson? Is Isaac Jones going to be better than Slauson? Maybe, maybe not. A little disappointed in that. But it is what it is. At the end of the day, it's your 16th, 17th, 18th guys on the roster. And you're trying to develop these guys. And I have trust in the Kings front office and coaching staff, because they showed that they could do it with Keon Ellis. And right now, the Kings, obviously, I went through the roster. In terms of playable wings, it was just Keegan Murray. And even in terms of like the possible guys that you could play as front court players or as forwards, I mean, there's nobody really. And so even in the Kings' depth, it's not super front court heavy. I mean, they have some wings, but even, Chris Duarte, like, sure, I could designate him as a wing, but even he's a smaller player. And so there have to be more moves coming for the Kings for this to be a successful offseason. And I believe there will be, but it's interesting to see how big the Kings are going to go. Are they just going to use the mid-level exception, go out, sign a player, maybe make like one more trade to like shave some money in that case? Or are they going to go for a bigger trade, whether that be a Brandon Ingram or a Kyle Kuzma? Because, I mean, really, you can do both. You can trade for Kyle Kuzma with the contracts that you have in Harrison Barnes, Kevin Huerter, and such. And you can still use your mid-level exception. I don't think the Kings want to be in the luxury tax. I don't think Vivek does. Obviously, they made moves to get under the luxury tax so that they could use that full MLE, but I don't even think that they want to use the full MLE if that means they're going to go over the luxury tax. Hopefully they do, right? Because no one's going to be happy if Vivek just doesn't want to spend that extra money, because he's a super rich guy, and why would we care about his pockets? We don't. At the same time, if you're being realistic, you have to get inside of his head and you have to say, what is going to make him feel like it's worth it to spend into the luxury tax? Is this roster and whatever we're getting to be able to spend into the tax, is that going to be worth spending into the luxury tax? And the answer at this point is, I have no idea, because Vivek has never been in this position. Like, he's never been in a position where he has a team that is even remotely good enough to be worth spending into the luxury tax, to even possibly spend into the luxury tax. And so we have to hope that he's willing to spend, and then we have to hope that the right guys are willing to come to Sacramento, because I have faith that Monte McNair will target the correct guys, like a Najee Marshall. There are other guys, but he's just the example I'm using. And so we have to hope that they want to come to Sacramento. Because if you trade Davion Mitchell and Sasha Vezenkov and 2 second-round picks for practically nothing, if we're assuming Jalen McDaniels is really not going to play, sure, it's 2 players that weren't going to play anyways, probably. But still, if you're spending those picks, it means you're going to do something with that money. You're not just going to spend those picks, hopefully, just so you don't have to spend money. And really, we know that that's not the case, because they could have just stretched Sasha's contract, gotten rid of him, stretched his contract. They would have been fine under the luxury tax. And so we know that they're actually trying to make more room to make a move. That's kind of how we know that this isn't just a get under the luxury tax. This is get under the luxury tax so we can spend. If the Kings go into next season with a top like 9 or 10 of De'Aaron Fox, Malik Monk, Devin Carter, Keon Ellis as your guards, 4 guards, Keegan Murray plus a wing, another wing as your wings, forwards, Harrison Barnes and Trey Lyles, maybe not Harrison Barnes because he could be involved in the trade, and then Domantas Sabonis and maybe like an Alex Len coming back. I'm very happy with that type of top 10 as long as that wing that you bring in is a starting level player. So I really think at this point the Kings are one move away from being where we want them to be heading into this next season, at least where I want them to be. Other notes on the draft, it was pretty boring because it's the second round and the coverage was really boring, so I didn't even watch all of it. And the Kings obviously didn't have a pick, and so I'm just, I was just monitoring the phone, seeing if the Kings traded into a pick, because that's always possible. There were just a million trades going everywhere. You have Bronny going to the Lakers, of course. His agent threatening that he might play on Australia if another team picks him. I think Rich Paul is his agent, right? Funny stuff. Mainly because, like, every agent does that for their second round picks. It's like, don't pick this guy because he wants to sign with this team in undrafted free agency, or don't pick this guy so he falls to this team. Like, that happens with every team. But of course, because it's Bronny, because it's the Lakers, it's a big deal. It's funny to me. The Toronto Raptors, they spent their 45th pick that we traded them on a 6-foot guard. So it's kind of funny. Now they got Emmanuel Quickly and then Davion Mitchell and another small guard. So they're banking on one of these guys, hopefully 2 of them working out. I'm hoping that Davion and Sasha both have success over there in Toronto. I mean, Sasha, I like I said, I think he's an NBA rotational player, just not here because he didn't fit. Davion, I don't know what to make of him. I gave up on him midway through last season, and then he came on and was shooting the ball really well, and he had some great moments here. He had probably the best moment for me in terms of me being there in person to watch when he hit that corner 3 to beat the Warriors and pretty much put the game away late in the fourth quarter against the Warriors in game 2 of the playoffs. He had some great moments. He had some impactful moments here playing in the playoffs, and he's such an interesting player because he does things well, and he's an absolute dog, but he just doesn't do this one thing well, which is shoot from deep, and that's why he can't totally stay on the court. But he is such a fun player to watch. At one point, I think I said he was my favorite player to watch just because of the way he played defense, and that is absolutely true. And so hopefully he has success in Toronto. Anyways, that is it for this episode of the Roll Report, wrapping up the draft. I will, of course, be right back here if anything else happens regarding the Kings. I will be back here for free agency, which should be fun. At least the anticipation is always fun. And then what happens is usually underwhelming, but that's okay because it's still fun to have all these what ifs. At least it's fun for me. So I will see you guys then. Peace.